All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour, where Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai is to be in court today facing charges related to a 3-year-old offence. Jimmy Lai has been accused of threatening to injure a man during the 2017 Tiananmen Square vigil at Victoria Park. Charges framed against Jimmy Lai include criminal intimidation, and he has pleaded not guilty to the offence. The dozens of pro-Beijing protesters gathered outside the court and chanted slogans against Jimmy Lai as he arrived. Jimmy Lai is one of the most prominent pro-democracy voices in Hong Kong and is also being viewed as Beijing's public enemy #1. He was very recently arrested under the controversial national security law and is currently out on bail. Now, even US President Donald Trump has taken note of his arrest. On Wednesday, the president sent his best wishes to Jimmy Lai and called him a wonderful gentleman and also a brave man to be standing up to China. Listen.
Well, I send him best wishes. I hear he's a wonderful gentleman. He's certainly a brave man, and I send him best wishes. With that being said, because of that and obviously what happened in Hong Kong, we've taken all of the vast amounts of money that we used to subsidize Hong Kong. We essentially subsidized Hong Kong by giving them all sorts of incentives, and that's what made Hong Kong, the exchange and business in Hong Kong successful. I've taken it all back.
Now, Donald Trump is also pushing ahead with his plan to end Hong Kong's special status. The United States has terminated 3 bilateral agreements with Hong Kong as part of this decoupling. The now defunct agreements facilitated the surrender of fugitives, the exchange of convicted felons, and also offered tax breaks on maritime trade. Now, Donald Trump decided to end Hong Kong's special treatment after China imposed a new national security law in the city. While Beijing has argued that the law will actually improve security, there is widespread consensus that it is actually aimed at cracking down dissent in Hong Kong. Now, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that the termination of these treaties. On Twitter, he also went on to accuse the Communist Party of China of crushing the freedom and autonomy that was enjoyed by the residents of Hong Kong. All right, now to give us a better perspective in terms of what is playing out in Hong Kong even as we speak, we're joined in by Richard Kimber, who's joining us live from Hong Kong. Good afternoon to you, Richard. Let me begin by asking you about this very high-profile case of Jimmy Lai. He is to be in court today on a charge of an incident that is said to have taken place way back in the year 2017. But many believe that the reason why he's being prosecuted is because he is a very prominent pro-democracy voice in Hong Kong. So what is happening in his trial today?
That's right. He denies these charges of intimidating a rival journalist at a Tiananmen commemoration event some 3 years ago. All of his supporters and many of the pro-democracy campaigners here in Hong Kong who support his standing up against the government and against China, they do see him as being personally persecuted over many of these issues, including, of course, the arrest under the national security law just 10 days ago. And so they very much don't like the idea that people like him who are actually standing up for what they believe in are being singled out and are being repeatedly hauled back into court. On the flip side, there are those, as the campaigners you played a clip from earlier on, who are standing outside the court chanting his name as a traitor to Hong Kong because they see him as stirring up trouble and inciting young people to protest against the government, which they say is destabilizing Hong Kong and ruining the economy, very much parroting the line that the government is spouting out here about trying to ensure more stability for Hong Kong's long-term future. So an increasingly divisive figure in the city now, Jimmy Lai, and so much so that he's actually now, as you say, being name-checked by the US president, which, just to give some context, would have been unthinkable some 5 years ago when this protest movement began, that a pro-democracy campaigner could end up being the subject of a White House Q&A.
Absolutely. And also to dwell a little bit more upon this trial, the case that's been put against Jimmy Lai. What kind of evidence is being presented against Jimmy Lai, stating that he had tried to intimidate one of his rival journalists about 3 years ago?
Well, there is a video going to be played in court today that shows Jimmy Lai present with some of these other journalists, and from what I understand, that the prosecution and the defence will both agree that indeed Jimmy Lai was present at that time, and that they won't deny that he was not there, but he is denying these charges of intimidation and threatening this other journalist. The fine for this punishment could be up to 2 years in prison and a $2,000 fine. So it's a reasonable potential problem for Jimmy Lai if, of course, this goes through and he ends up being arrested and jailed over this charge.
Right.
He is strongly denying this, and his legal team are suggesting that this whole charge is groundless. So we'll find out in the next 24 hours whether this goes anywhere. But at the moment, this is seen as a relatively low-level charge compared to that which he is also facing under the national security law, having been arrested under that for secession and collusion with foreign forces, which will be a far more serious charge, and that will resume next month.
Absolutely, indeed. And about a week ago, he was arrested and then he was let off on bail. Now, Jimmy Lai is no ordinary individual. He's also said to be a media tycoon. He owns this newspaper called Apple Daily, which is one of the most read newspapers in Hong Kong. You know, I would like to know from you, has there been any kind of a change in its editorial line that it has been taking ever since the new security law has come in place, and also since his arrest?
Well, the simple answer to that is no. The headquarters for that newspaper just around the corner from where I'm standing, and there were 200-odd police going into that building last week, and I was there watching this all happen. The editor-in-chief of that newspaper, immediately after that police raid took place, said very clearly that he had no intention of changing anything about the newspaper's operation. They would continue to publish. They would continue to publish anti-government messages and pro-democracy activist messages, and they have no intention of changing whatsoever. The newspaper has received a huge uprising of support from the public here since that police raid took place, with many, many thousands more copies being sold every day, and a huge amount of support for Jimmy Lai's business as well on the stock market that actually owns that newspaper. So there has been a huge public uprising of support for him, but as I say, still some who find him and his entire business operation to be a troublesome enterprise, trying to stir up more reasons for economic and social instability in Hong Kong. So a great deal more uprising to continue probably with regards to this individual.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll of course be tracking Jimmy Lai and what happens with the court cases that are being slapped on him. But I want you to talk a bit more about, you know, another crucial development that has taken place, where the United States has now suspended 3 treaties that it had with the autonomous territory of Hong Kong. They were to do with extradition and also with the taxation that the United States had with Hong Kong. Now that the United States has decided to suspend them, you know, how is this being viewed by the Chinese? Do they view this as aggression on the part of the United States?
Well, this is, as usual, been dismissed by both the Hong Kong government and will likely be dismissed by the Beijing Foreign Ministry in a few minutes from now when they hold their afternoon briefing. The Hong Kong government, though, interestingly, specifically saying that it thinks that this act by the US is going to hurt the US more than it will do the US any good. And they're saying that from their own statistics of what's been actually happening under these agreements, for example, the US has, since 1998, received 69 fugitives from Hong Kong, whereas Hong Kong has only received 23. So the Hong Kong government says clearly the US is going to lose out more if this agreement is cancelled. Also on the issue of exemption from taxation, it says that because local Hong Kong shippers are already exempt from local duties in Hong Kong, what will now happen is US international shippers will have to pay double tax, whereas Hong Kong shippers will only have to pay tax in the US. So again, they say in both cases the US is hurting itself more than it's doing any good by cancelling these agreements. So the Hong Kong government being very critical and very specifically critical about why these measures are not making any sense as far as they're concerned.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Kimber, for joining us from Hong Kong and getting us all those insights into